from East Africa, we go out into the ocean and we go to Diego Garcia. And Diego Garcia is very interesting. And the story comes from the BBC, the BBC World Service. The story leads with US blocks British court from British territory. And that is Diego Garcia. More on that later. The US government has blocked a British court from hearing from a court, well, blocked a British court hearing from taking place on a British territory, citing security concerns, according to official documents. The Supreme Court of the British Indian Ocean Territory was due to hold a hearing this week, attended by the BBC, on whether a group of migrants were being unlawfully detained on the island of Diego Garcia. The island hosts a secretive UK-US military base, and access is heavily restricted. The US last week said it was withdrawing its consent from lawyers representing the migrants and the members of the press, the BBC, to access the island, according to official communications we have seen. It said it would not allow participants of the hearing to board US military flights to Diego Garcia and would not provide housing, transportation, and food for the visits. The US said it is willing to reconsider if the visit was conducted in a manner that addressed its security and operational concern. For those who are wondering where Diego Garcia is literally bang next to Mauritius, which is Africa. So, and the security concerns relate to the site-state visit, which has been scheduled to take place on the island as part of the hearing, which was to include the migrant camp and several other areas of Diego Garcia. What is your initial take before I even... This is just...
My initial take is, how is British territory in the Indian Ocean 2,000 miles away from the African coastline? How is that possibly British territory? You know? So this is imperialism at its best on display. You know, this reminds me of the so-called Boer War in South Africa at the turn of the 20th century, the end of the 19th century, when, of course, South Africa was occupied by Dutch and by British Europeans who seized the land and then eventually started seizing the mineral resources. So after there was a major discovery of gold and diamond, so you had the British and the Dutch fighting and killing each other in South Africa over something that didn't belong to them. And in fact, this was when the British first put to major test the system of concentration camps, right?
Yep.
When they confined the Dutch in concentration camps and killed almost 30,000 of fellow Europeans. And
on
this
the continent of Africa.
See who ends up controlling the gold and diamond in South Africa. So now you have the United States making policy or taking action over land that is allegedly British. You know, even though the closest territory are African territories, you know?
Correct.
So that to me is my first initial impression before you go any further, as you asked, you know?
Okay. Now, Diego Garcia, for those who don't know, actually is a name that was given to it post 1972. The initial name of the island is called Chagos Island.
Right.
And what transpired there is a case of settler colonialism with a military face. What happened? The US wanted the territory. The territory at the time was next to Mauritius. Mauritius, by being a colony of the United Kingdom, they took everybody off the island and gassed animals and what have you into a pit, concrete the place over, renamed the place Diego Garcia. The UK took control of the Chagos Islands, of which Diego Garcia is part, from its then colony Mauritius in 1965. It went on to evict its population of more than 1,000 to make way for the military base. Agreements, like you said, were signed, which allowed for an initial 50-year period of US use of the territory, plus a further 20 years, making a total of 70 years. The agreement was then rolled over in 2016, and is now set to expire in 2036. Now, there has been a series of cases challenging the situation. The last being recently in the United Kingdom, where a judge said, although we agree that the government should return the land, but the hands of the court are effectually tied. The UN did pass a resolution, and the resolution says the land should be returned, to which you all know what will happen next. It falls on deaf ears. So this is a classic case of 1,000 people who have lost their heritage. Their land was concrete over. We're talking about land that have hosted them for hundreds of years. Their loved ones were buried there. Their life is there. Some of them are now refugees in Mauritius and Seychelles. There are a couple of them in London, but still, it's just the nature of how people go in to other people's places, upstage the population. I mean, one would say this pales in comparison to what was done to.
If they had their way, they would have exterminated all of them. You see?
That was what I was going to next.
Right. They did not succeed. That's why we're discussing it today.
Yeah.
And that's why we need more people to take interest and don't just say, oh, this is a faraway place.
Yeah.
With a very tiny population. No, everybody has the right to sovereignty.
Yeah.
And to determine their own affairs. You can't say because it's a tiny place. Look at tiny Grenada.
Yep.
Right? A population of, at the time, Maurice Bishop was there, maybe around 80,000.
Yep.
Right? If that even, maybe even less, because today I think it's around 125,000. Yet, look at the impact it had in inspiring people around the world in terms of the social transformation and revolution that Maurice Bishop and his New Jewel movement was trying to put in place in Grenada. The United States felt threatened by that. And obviously, when there was a power struggle in 1983, and Bishop was killed by a faction that was controlled by his deputy at that time, that gave the United States the excuse that it wanted to invade the country and claim that it was going there to protect U.S. citizens. So the size, look at what Thomas Sankara was accomplishing in tiny Burkina Faso.
Yeah.
It had global impact, right? So we don't know if there's another Maurice Bishop, there's a Thomas Sankara, somewhere there in what they're referring to now as Diego Garcia. So they have their rights and they must get their rights.